Very much, Mr. Moderator, Nigeria, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioner, Heads of Mission, and of course the senior staff and management of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as the United Nations Development Program, and of course my co-pilots in presenting some of these ideas, Professor Camille Kamaldeen, and our technical spearheader on my right-hand side, Mr. Matthew Alao, both from the United Nations Development Program, who have been with us in the trenches, helping to shape and design the technical mechanisms behind this. Members of the press, if you are here, let me bid you a very warm, and of course in Nigeria, it's a warm afternoon. I think the Honourable Minister and the resident representative very aptly set the tone and the tenor, and also the expectations of why we are here gathered. But I think it's useful for us to revisit that in a bit more depth. It is indeed my honor on behalf of the Honourable Minister and of course our partners at UNDP to present some thoughts and the concept that we're here to share with you, which is very much a brainchild of the Honourable Minister and of course brought alive by the very excellent partnership that we have with the United Nations Development Program, and of course which we hope that by the end of our discussions today will also be sustained as well as strengthened with your support and your partnership as well. Your Excellencies, it is no secret that West Africa, and in fact the world, is at a defining moment when it comes to us talking and thinking about democracy. What it means, how it should function, and quite importantly, what it should deliver. There are growing questions across the whole world, north, south, and the many countries where you all come from, about how democracy is really delivering on the expectations of the electorate. And we're hearing this in many different forms and different facets. And any responsive government, any responsive region, any country or continent that wants to be able to thrive and at peace must begin to have a conversation about these questions that are being asked. We are at a critical juncture in history, a time when a lot of what we thought about the global order and even the architecture of global governance is being restructured, being redesigned, and being rethought. To some people, that might pose a major challenge, but everything is about perspective. From this end of the table, we decide to look at it as an opportunity to rethink Africa's position in the global order, West Africa's position in Africa and beyond, and quite importantly, the role that democracy plays in ensuring that the dividends of that democracy is really translated into impacts on the ground in the lives and livelihoods of people in the region and even beyond. So what is the regional partnership for democracy? First, like we said, it is really rethinking democracy as an inclusive project. A project that is not just about government, but is also about collaboration between the critical sectors in our society, being government, civil society, media, and of course you, our diplomatic actors and allies in the Global Committee of Nations. But for a long time, democracy has perhaps falsely been seen as a construct, a Western construct, something that perhaps did not exist within the African sub-region. But many scholars of African culture and history will know that indeed, in many African forms of governance, democracy was at its very, very core. So, one of the key things about regional partnership for democracy is also thinking about how do we begin to promote a Pan-African democratic philosophy, one that reflects our values, reflects our history, our culture, and that is not so far away a concept from the people or its traditions. That is one of the only ways it can be sustained. If it's owned and if people feel that it is theirs, not something imposed on them from outside. But then the other critical question about democracy is really about governance, because really governance is the machinery for delivering on the promises of democracy. So how do we ensure that we strengthen the systems, the processes, the mechanisms for inclusive, effective, and transparent governance within the West African sub-region? As I mentioned yesterday, we're a continent of values. Values are the core of our culture. How do we ensure that democracy itself is further enhanced within our cultural practices? And quite importantly, at a time when the global order is being fast transformed with the arrival of social media, artificial intelligence, how do we ensure that democracy continues to mean what Africans want it to mean and what is real on the African continent? But no country or region is an island. So we know only too well that for democracies to thrive, we must have cooperation. How do we ensure that in our region, in West Africa, where we worked exceptionally well under the leadership of His Excellency the President through ECOWAS and other platforms, how do we strengthen democratic governance and regional cooperation, and like I said before, deliver on the dividends of democracy? What makes it a necessity? Because I'm sure there's nothing that I've said that you all have not thought about or perhaps even discussed. Well, again, it is no secret that in some parts of the West African sub-region, some will call it democratic backsliding, some will call it democratic restructuring. But this restructuring is not only happening in Africa, it's not only happening in West Africa, it's happening across the Western world as well. So, responsive leadership means we respond to the realities before us. And RPD seeks to calibrate a conversation across the region and helps us to think of how we not only reverse the backsliding, but we ensure that the restructuring produces a democratic culture and results that reflect the views, the hopes, and the aspirations of West Africans and indeed Africans. But this will only be a wish list, ladies and gentlemen, without strategic leadership and policy harmonization. In today's world, we are so interconnected that what happens in Nigeria, of course, can be felt in other parts of the sub-region. So how do we ensure that the strategic leadership and policy harmonization drives this conversation about democracy? In addition to that is coordination. Many of you seated around the table will remember the initiative called the New Partnership for Africa's Development, which was initiated then by President Obasanjo, President Abdoulaye Wade from Senegal, the President of Egypt, amongst many others, which really, like we are trying to do now, recalibrated not just the discussion about Africa, but also the direction of the continent and its partnerships with our friends in the Global Committee of Nations. To do that, we need to have effective coordination, but also in terms of mutual accountability, holding ourselves to account to the right standards and making sure that we, as peers within the region, ensure that our governance mechanisms and approaches are in line with the values that we have set for ourselves. Also, in a knowledge economy, it is again no secret that we have to keep learning. But the question is, where are we learning from? Of course, no knowledge is lost, and no one has any monopoly of that knowledge. For a long time, we have been learning from our friends in the West, and I dare say, we've learned really, really well. But we, as a continent and as a people, also have lessons to teach ourselves, and perhaps even our friends from in the global community may borrow a leaf or two for some of our own practices as well. So how do we promote peer learning and ensure that we're also getting technical support from one another within the region. As I said earlier on, people are agitating to see the dividends, the products, the produce, the impact of democracy. And they're seeking to see that, not just in our academic intellectual conversations, but in their pockets, in their stomachs, in their daily lives and livelihoods. And this means that at the end of the day, people want to see results. They want to see results, and they want to also ensure that they are carried along and included in that process. So the vision of the Regional Partnership for Democracy is really about a multi-country initiative rooted in shared values, aspirations, based on regional cooperation. It's a platform to coordinate, to learn, and to lead democratic innovation. And thirdly, a West African democratic model that delivers the dividends of democracy for the people and also unites the region. Without unity, it will be a challenge to do all the above, and I'm sure you agree. The vision statement crafted by the team, and I'm sure you will all nod in agreement, is that to advance democratic governance in West Africa, we must promote ownership, inclusion, integrity, and effective institutions that serve the people. Of course, after you foray in this space for a while, you tend to be a mind reader. The Honourable Minister can sit across the table and tell what you're thinking, so be careful. And we know only too well that one question that might be on the minds of people is, why is Nigeria spearheading the RPD? Well, it starts with Mr. President himself. The President came into office with the promise of a renewed hope agenda. Our President is locally grounded. His African roots are very strong. His Pan-African posture is very, very clear. But he's also very cosmopolitan and very international. And at times you can even hear him with a little bit of an American accent from time to time. So he knows only too well that to renew hope in Nigeria, you also need to renew hope in West Africa. To renew hope in West Africa, you need to do the same in Africa. But to renew hope in Africa, we also need to renew our partnership, the tenor, the direction, and even the basis of our engagement and our position in the international global order. So this is very much in line with Mr. President's renewed hope agenda and what is called the Tinubu Doctrine of Foreign Policy, very ably championed by His Excellency, the Foreign Minister. And for those of you that know that, it's the 4D strategy which he mentioned. And again, in that 4D strategy, at the very top, the very first pillar in that is democracy. So, Nigeria is very much in line with its strategic thrust, as well as the renewed hope agenda of Mr. President. But again, to whom much is given, much is expected. We often say that Nigeria is the largest democracy in Africa. In fact, it is the largest democracy in the Black world. Meaning that it has a responsibility to play a leadership role. And it's one which it has been playing for decades within West Africa and across the continent as well. And in that regard, it is seeking to set the tone for a renewed democratic conversations. Again, Nigeria has regional influence, as you know, through multiple regional platforms, as well as particularly the African Union. And of course, in driving collaboration, that has been mentioned. But the Honourable Minister continues to emphasize something, and I think this is something we must take home, which is that Nigeria is only spearheading, kickstarting, jump-starting this process. But the emphasis is on partnership and collective ownership and action. So while Nigeria jump-starts this process, the expectation, and particularly from the member states that gathered here yesterday, the expectation is that it's going to be a collective enterprise that we're all engaging together. And of course, Mr. Honourable Minister has invited you, our partners, to be part of that process. Again, why is RPD important to strengthen regional democracy? Because it shares an African vision, a collective vision of democracy, and it will also help to reclaim ownership of Africa's democratic evolution based on our values and aspirations, driving institutional resilience, and like I mentioned earlier on, driving mutual learning and mutual accountability. And then we come to you, Your Excellencies. Why are you gathered here, and why do you matter? Well, we do know you matter, which is why you've been invited. But quite importantly, what role can you play? The Honourable Minister, in his opening remarks, has already made his charge. A very humble, clear, and articulate call for action. But in addition to that, what it does, and your role in supporting this initiative, is that it also adds additional legitimacy to the process. It signals international commitment to our efforts, not just as Nigeria, but as a region, into taking our destiny in our own hands and ensuring regional stability and democracy. Of course, democracy is not a new project. Your countries have been experimenting for many years, perhaps some of you before us. So in many areas, there are things you know that we can share. And secondly, there are doors that you can open that we perhaps may not be positioned to open. This is what partnership is about, comparative advantage. Therefore, one of the areas in which you can actually assist and support in this process is through leverage, opening doors, technical, financial, and diplomatic resources to scale up the impact of the work that has begun here. And lastly, well, I won't say lastly, because I'm sure there are many other ways, but in addition is leadership. Because you as representatives of your capital can always go back home and share the good news of what's happening here in West Africa, and also join us as co-architects of Africa's democratic trajectory, especially as we redraw this. There's some practical ways as well. There are ways in which you can help, for example, through thematic roundtables and knowledge-sharing events, the events that you host, policy dialogues, where the discussion about RPD can be put front and center and can also help to generate more attention as well as more support. Same thing for the discussions that you have in the diplomatic spaces. And I think, Your Excellencies, that by so doing, you will be very clearly signaling and demonstrating your support for democracy and development in West Africa, especially one driven through an indigenous African process. There are a few other ways, and I'll just go through them very quickly. Technical partnership. Like I said, nobody has the monopoly of knowledge. We're keen to hear and to learn and to receive technical support wherever it may be needed. Joint advocacy. There are issues that we need to deal with at home, and we will, but there are also issues that need to be dealt with abroad. And perhaps in that regard, through your good offices, you can help to engage in joint advocacy. There are also several institutional, bilateral, and donor platforms where these conversations can be had, and RPD can be pulled into the discourse as a tool through which democracy and development can be strengthened. Your endorsement will also be helpful, of course, because it will also help us to ensure that this can actually be scaled up into a regional framework. And of course, we all talk very much about evidence-based policy. Research is critical to evidence-based policy, data-driven decisions that can help with strategic thinking as well. And many of your countries have citadels of learning, think tanks that are able to support us with regional partnerships, research partnerships. And of course, thematic convening. Having your good selves working with the RPD team and all our partners in the international community to deepen the conversation, to strengthen the conversation, to offer platforms for Africans, West Africans, and members of this team to be able to drive these discussions, build the confidence, and ensure that at the end of the day, that, like someone said yesterday, that the three key words, regional, partnership, and democracy, will come together as one, and as a result, we'll be able to see an Africa that has not just come of age, but one that can actually chart the course of shaping its own future in partnership and in collaboration with you, our excellencies, representatives of your capitals, and helping to ensure that what we're trying to do here in Africa resonates in your capitals and has the support and the partnership that is required. We thank you very much for listening, and we invite you to join our partnership.
Thank you very much for the well-delivered, very articulate, and very informative presentation, Mr. Dapo. Well, we've been provided with all this information. It is time for us to interact and to interrogate the information before us. So, Your Excellencies, the floor is open, and just indicate if you have any questions to ask or any comments to make. And I'm sure the Honourable Minister, the President Representative, and the presenters are more than able to answer those questions. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, thank you. My name is Alex. I'm the ambassador of Germany. Well, thank you very much, Honourable Minister, members of the National Assembly, LC, UNDP colleagues around the table. I think this is a very, very important initiative that you have started here in partnership with the Nigerian government together with UNDP, and it's also important that you are inviting us to join you in this, and I think the subject matter as such already makes it clear that you have us on board for that subject. There's no doubt about it. My question is just, it's a bit more technical. How were the consultations led with the countries in the regions that are supposed to be both partners and recipients and beneficiaries and partners in that initiative? How was the buy-in, and which of those countries will be, you mentioned there will be a pilot phase. Will there be any particular countries where the pilot will start? And also how can the complementary, this was also mentioned with ECOWAS. ECOWAS plays an important role in the region and also in the area of strengthening democracy and developing democratic institutions in the member states. So how will the cooperation with ECOWAS work, and what discussions have been led with ECOWAS? And then maybe a more difficult question, how will the countries that you described as the backsliding ones, how will they be involved, and how can their buy-in be achieved, and how do you want to convince them to be part of this initiative? Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have another question, or will the Honourable Minister want to attend to this one?
Well, I will defer to the technical people on either side.
Thank you, Excellency.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, and just to touch on the questions. For us, I'll take the backsliders first. For us, we were not looking at geography in terms of democracy backsliding. We are looking at the theme, democracy, and we see it beyond West Africa. as backsliding everywhere. Backsliding in the lives of the people, that should be served. Backsliding in the lives of those duty bearers. And backsliding in terms of the dividends that should be delivered. And I'm sure you all agree on that. So we have to do something. And Nigeria, with its leadership role, its leadership qualities, and its own responsibilities in the region, has to take the lead. That is what the country is doing now. And the country recognizes the fact that it cannot do this without the partners around the table. Because it is the feeling of Nigeria that we all share the sentiment that we could do a lot more to get the conversion between democracy and its dividend as high as it could be. On the question of consultation, RPD is at the initial phases of evolution. And the question sounded as if this were a revolution. No, this is evolutionary. And in an evolutionary process, you engage critical stakeholders, starting with the countries yesterday, with the partners today, and with other partners, including the civil society. For the rest of this week and next, we'll continue to engage. Partners will come in, and partners will continue to buy in. That is the expectation of the minister. That is the expectation of all of us of democracy. We do not see this as a political process. No, not in the political sense, but we see this as a responsibility and a partnership that will eventually gain support of partners and of the countries themselves. But we recognize the fact that we cannot do that without making sure that it talks to them, that it does respect the values and culture, that it touches on things that bring us together, right to the core of being African, West African. And that's especially what is happening now. So we will not point fingers. We will not point fingers, but we would be focused, as the minister has said, this is a platform that is set free. It's not hamstrung by any country, by any particular value, by any particular order, but by the intrinsic values of democracy, imbued by the values of being West African. That is right. And it just reminded me to talk about ECOWAS. We've been consulting with ECOWAS, just as we are consulting with all the critical actors. And the consultations and interactions and contributions have been very positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Any more questions or comments? Thank you very much. Please use the mic on the table mic.
Good afternoon to all. My name is Gauthier Nino. I am the European Union Ambassador in Nigeria and ECOWAS. Honourable Minister, Honourable Representatives, dear UN colleagues, dear colleagues, dear professors. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. We welcome and commend this initiative because I think we all agree on the diagnosis that democracy has failed to deliver on the expectations of citizens. And actually it's not only in West Africa, we can see this. I like the combination of this African leadership and ownership and of openness to partnerships, financial partnerships. I think it's a good cocktail, a good combination. Indeed, democracy belongs to every democratic nation. And actually, there's not one single democratic model. In the West, Canadian democracy is not the same as a Swiss democracy, and even within the EU, we have several models of democracy among the member states, each adjusted to the particularity of each nation and the historical moments. Now, I would have four questions. Well, I had 4 questions. 2 were already put forward by my German colleague and were answered about ECOWAS and about those countries in the region who are clearly turning their backs to democracy, unlike other countries which are in transition. And my two other questions would be first, I think there is an important aspect which we have also to take into account, which are foreign interference and manipulation of information. You know that this is one of the factors, it's not the only one, explaining factor of this feeling of citizens that democracy has not been up to the expectations, but it is a factor indeed. And I think we have sufficiently evidence of that, again, not only in West Africa. And how does the RPD intend to address these elements if it does want to take into account? That's my first question. My second question would be to try to have a little bit of clearer idea of what kind of activities, initiatives will be implemented in the framework of the RPD. Exchange of good practices, for instance, to take into account the digital space into the function of democracy today, or peer reviews among the countries. Could you tell us a little bit more about the kind of activities that will be implemented? And finally, congratulations to Nigeria, of course, as the largest democracy in Africa, to champion this. I think that doing this with the UNDP, with the United Nations, of course, is also very important to show this spirit of openness that which you are describing this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I can chip in. In regards to the first question, actually, you know, yesterday we had two presentations. I think some of these questions would have been answered if you had made the presentation, but particularly peer review and some of these things that were raised. And are you still going to make a presentation? Or?
No, we didn't want to bore them with the technicalities, but now
There's demand. There's demand.
there is demand for this. and we will offer.
So, but let me just address the issue of foreign interference, particularly to do with misinformation. This is one of the areas that RPD intends to focus on, addressing that, countering it, and because, as you said, some of these challenges to democracy are not unique to West Africa, ECOWAS region, they're global. And part of the problem is our media ecosystems don't seem to support deliberation anymore. And of course, like I keep saying, you know, this concept of post-truth era further complicates matters. So it's important, and I think with the technical presentation you will hear that, you know, the idea also is to engage with civil society. So it's not just simply engaging with governments, but also civil society, and you know, also tackling. Oh, sorry, and also tackling the challenge of the definition of civil society itself, because part of the problem we face in Africa is, of course, the modern state system, the Westphalian system that we work with, is primarily based on, if you pardon me saying, a Western construct. So what may be construed or defined as civil society in, let's say, Europe, may not necessarily be the same here, or certain civil society organizations or groups are not included here because they are not considered by that definition to be civil society. So these are some of the things that we intend to interrogate in partnership, of course, with countries, with other organizations, and with you. And then there is also the, I would say, the responsibilities of the moral agent himself, the citizen, because of course, this is a moral philosophy question, so we're going a bit not technical but philosophical. Because citizens themselves have a responsibility, but for them to have that responsibility and partake and participate, they have to understand what it is, which goes back to the social contract. So is the social contract premised and defined in our countries, in our region, the same way that it is in other older democracies? These are some of the things that we need to tackle, because the moral agent has a responsibility as a citizen, but you have to feel to be a part of it. So here you actually even see sometimes the challenges to the concept of public property, because prior to colonization, public property, I think we've discussed this before, public property, so even prisons, there wasn't a public prison. For instance, in northern Nigeria, there was in the word, and a lot is revealed in the language, there was a Gidenyari. Gidenyari means house of the chief warder of the emir. And it was his responsibility to look after the prisoners. Of course, the funding would come from the Beit al-Mal, from the public funds, through the emir or through the council. But because of some of these gaps, public property is often considered to be outside of the state, outside of the system, and what we call here in Nigeria awoof. That's why people sometimes go and try to steal stuff from what is public. But if there's somebody responsible for it, that they understand, even a mosque, there was no such thing as a public mosque, central mosque. There was a mosque of the emir, there's a mosque of the imam of this neighborhood or that neighborhood, and they are responsible for taking care of those properties, even if the funding was coming from taxation or from the public. But all of that, I think, needs to be re-examined, and at a wider level, at a broader level, because we need that broadness to be able to take advantage of scale, which is what ECOWAS is all about. It's about scale so that smaller countries can leverage on the larger market, so that large countries like Nigeria that are going to end up with 400 million people can also leverage on that space as well. We only have 923,000 square kilometers, so we work together, and going back to the social contract. Thank you. I hope it makes sense.
Honourable Minister, Excellency, may I crave your indulgence to perhaps ask the KK to just give a bit of meat on the bone, so that we can perhaps frame some of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Honourable Minister. I will speak to the elements of the technical part of the presentation. And I apologize, we had thought that as the cream of the diplomatic community, it's better we discuss the substantive questions that might be of interest to you. But
you even had a slideshow yesterday.
Yeah, we did. We did have a slideshow yesterday. No, I have it before me, and I'm sure I can speak to it. Now, yeah, we can share something afterwards. Thank you. Now, I will start with the slide that responds to your question, Your Excellency, in terms of what are the issues that we are going to deal with. Virtually everything is important in a democratic context, as long as it adds value to quality of citizenship, it adds value to quality of governance, it adds value to exercise of rights of individuals and of community. It creates spaces for partnership and collaboration and advancement of a society, whether it's at the nuclear or it's at the extended level. So, this does not say it will do this and this and this only, but it is going to respond to challenges in their specificity, in their localities at any point in time. So issues like rule of law will be tackled, justice issues will be tackled, participation and representation, elections, human rights, service delivery, and so on and so forth. All of these, the RPD is robust and is flexible to tackle questions as they arise and respond as it is required. That is one. Two, it does have an organization structure, layers of responsibility that protects its independence, that protects its objectivity, that protects the respect for equality, for fairness, for sovereignty, for integrity, and accountability. And that structure is at 4 levels. At the highest level, you have the board, which is regional. This consists of the countries that are in it. They own it. Own is my word. They own it, and they lead the process. When they cut it there, it's cut. And whatever they say drives the process. That one has the attributes of collectivity. It has the attributes of inclusion at the very top, and it has the attributes of respect, not only for sovereignty, but for values and for the aspirations of the countries that are partners, West Africa. Next to it is a technical level where you have the experts and subject matter consultants that are also plural in nature, and they provide the technical input that gets upstairs to the board for approval. So when you prepare budgets, you prepare plans, you prepare terms of reference, and other concept papers, they are at the technical level, and they are at the level of details, and then you take them straight up to board for approval as it is necessary. Then there is a secretariat, and that is based in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yes, we are getting there. The secretariat does all the administrative and organizational support for the entire process. And you do have within the UNDP a core program coordination team. This is extremely important, and it touches both on your question, Your Excellency, and the question from Her Excellency, the German Ambassador. To protect integrity and quality of this process, and to maintain the neutrality and impartiality, you need a partner that brings his own credibility to the table. And that's what UNDP stands for. Apart from its expertise and experience and global networks that bring standards to bear on this, it's extremely important that that is there. And it has a functional value, because in reality, UNDP does it better than anybody else. But also symbolism, to answer questions from different countries, from different actors. Yeah, why is Nigeria doing this? Will Nigeria not be Nigerian in doing this? They're looking for Nigeria. So, no, we have UNDP that has its own independence, that has its own not resources, but expertise. They do have an experience. So that also helps to advance the process. So those are the levels. But then there's a potential fifth, which is country level implementation team. It is emphasized that within the purview of the RPD, we will have circumstances that will warrant establishment of units within different countries not a permanent feature, but as is required. That will require that we have a local implementation team in place. This is not going to be throughout the phases of the project, but as is required. For example, if there is a program to support participation and representation in a particular country that is coming out of difficult democratic challenge, you might want to have for 6 months, for 2 months, for 2 years, whatever, a project unit on the ground to provide on the go support to that country. That might require a local implementation team. They don't need to come to Abuja for answers. And final page that I would like to talk to will be the one dealing with taking thematic priorities, guiding principles. And I think this is important for partners because they answer questions as to why are we going to partner with you? Why are we going to sit down at the table? Why are we going to open our wallet? Why are we going to have all of these questions? These are standard principles that you will want. And I think, like he said, the minister reads your minds very well and has ensured that we get all the principles in that will help to answer your question. Respect for sovereignty and independence. This is a road well beaten in international relationship, and I should emphasize that it's also important. Every country, every partner that is within the RPD expects that there will be no negotiation when it comes to sovereignty issues and so on and so on. But beyond this, it's also about the cultures, about the values that are intrinsically West African, that has to give significance, be given significance in its democratic journey. Because some of the challenges we have had has been a little bit of conflict at times of the values of democracy and the values that are cultural to some of our countries, and how to bring the two together. They are not necessarily conflictual, but sometimes the way we interpret them or apply them may be conflictual. Rule of law and social contract. Rule of law is important because it does help us to protect those values that have long been agreed on: justice, of fairness, of equality. But also social contract, which is rooted in constitutionalism. And if you do not have that protected or respected, then we are going to start on the false pedestal. Inclusivity. Get everybody on it. It is beyond getting people included. It's also actually getting them respected, getting them to participate, getting them to involve in the definition, not only of the destination, but also of the journey. And particular attention also to the marginalized groups. And that will vary from context to context: women, young people, rural people, and those that are physically and economically, socially challenged or excluded. Non-partisanship, that's self-dividing. Accountability and transparency, that also ensures that there is integrity in the process. That's important for trust building and trust sustenance, because if we do not have that, everything collapses. And of course, we have to answer questions in terms of where resources have been put, why they have been put there, and how well they have been channeled as well. And context sensitivity. We have to be very sensitive to context, whether social, economic, or political context is very important, because at the core of democracy, you see the values that the people respect. And if it's going to work for them in their natural habitat, it has to take that habitat as a point of departure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor, for providing a little bit more context, technical context to the conversation. And I'm sure that speaks to a lot of our questions. So, moving forward, do we, Your Excellencies, have more comments or questions? Okay. Please use the table mic.
Excellency, Honourable Minister, and dear University and all the colleagues of the in Abuja. Well, given the importance of this initiative, I think that we are going to provide our official position on this initiative. Actually, report this activity and consultants as competent. But before we comment on this initiative, I just want to comment on the leadership of Nigeria in terms of advancing regional democracy and the regional integrity and unity. And after the disturbance which has happened in the past few years, we have witnessed Nigeria championed by President and also Mr. Koga in terms of foster the regional reconciliation of the whole West Africa and the high economic. And we believe that the leadership of Nigeria in the whole region is extremely critical and fundamental. And China will continue to work with Nigeria in terms of maintaining the regional stability and fostering development. In principle, China always supports the African to address African issues in African ways, and we believe that this initiative is one good example in terms of that direction. And in general, we will continue progressing and wish you success in terms of promoting this great initiative. Thank you very much.
Honourable Minister, distinguished Senator, honourable members, I hope I can stand on protocol already observed. We also welcome the initiative. I think it's very admirable, and I very much like the moral philosophy, the ethos of the approach. And I really enjoyed the presentation from DAPA, and Professor, your presentation is also very useful, including the guiding principles, because I think, as we all know from traditional development, and when I first started reading the document, this looked like a traditional development document. I realise it's not this. But we know that traditional development sometimes lapses into doing things to other people rather than following the sorts of ethos and the principles that you've outlined. And we really do recognise that. And I think we all recognise, as DAPA reference, that this is not just a West African problem, that democratic disillusionment or gaps between what governments can deliver and what citizens now expect, fueled by disinformation or social media or the rapid news cycle. That gap is growing, and it's a challenge for all of us. And what is not to admire about Nigeria taking the lead on this, given Nigeria's critical anchor role in this region and continent? You have some of the best intellectual capital. And of course the UK, where if we were asked, we would leverage our networks, whatever the research and other networks that we have, perhaps in the diasporas, which a number of countries have, if it's of use, but has to be aligned with the ethos and the principles. And I thought, Professor, the point you made about the oversight board, it's often, and this isn't just, this isn't unique to one culture, but the credibility of the people on the board inspire confidence or not in how the initiative will be perceived as it evolves, as it takes place. But I mean, that's not to criticise the structure, it's just to say. And I thought in response to the question from my close colleague, about which countries this is going to work in, I presume you need to resolve that by conversations which might not be public, but it is the sort of question that my head thought was exactly what we asked. But too early, we shouldn't be premature about asking questions which you don't want to provide an answer to yet. And it does seem to me that the process is as important as the outcome, because we can't predict what the outcome is. And again, the project document looks like a list of activities. It's the checklist for promoting democracy, rather than what the partnership process will bear. So my caution is, I don't know whether there is a local proverb about if you have fresh meat, you attract flies, something like that. But you have to be slightly careful of the phasing of this to build the credibility and the local partnerships. and we would be very cautious about stepping in where we don't actually have legitimacy. But I just wanted to say we really welcome the ethos and the concept. I'm very interested to talk more about it with the professor and the ethos.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think we have another question, comment.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And allow me to take the floor as Ambassador Designate of Austria, still pretty new here in Abuja. I want to thank the Honourable Minister for his very pertinent remarks, and also want to thank the Honourable gentlemen for their explanations on this very timely initiative. And I also want to thank you for your very pertinent remarks on the challenges faced by democracy, indeed in many parts around the world. Now, a lot of my esteemed colleagues from other embassies have already asked some pertinent questions on the details of this initiative, and I do not want to duplicate them. But I want to focus on one area that was part of the presentation, and that was the question of how we can all learn from each other in the field of how to make our democracies work. And I want to highlight a well-established international mechanism that I had the pleasure to work with in another part of my career, and that is the Universal Periodic Review under the auspices of the UN, where countries from all around the world indeed regularly have an opportunity to give in a very respectful and reciprocal and very constructive way, to give make concrete recommendations to their peers on how to improve the human rights situation. And I think there's the other wonderful aspect, and that the country that is under review can then accept or reject those recommendations, and that the whole thing is embedded in the UN system and can guide the work or be an inspiration for how the different parts of the UN system then implement their respective programs. And I would like to ask the Honourable Minister and the Honourable Gentleman whether they would be willing to consider such an example as a constructive way to make concrete recommendations and to provide a mechanism, a respectful mechanism, to give recommendations to the countries in the region or even outside this region on how to learn from each other and how to give each other recommendations on how to improve our democracies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Okay, Your Excellency, please.
Honourable Minister, Honourable Acting Country Representative, Professors, Ambassadors, first of all, I would like to thank for organizing this very fruitful event. I'm also in my capacity of Ambassador Designate, so even more I appreciate being able to participate, and for a representative of Poland, topic on strengthening or overcoming challenges to democracy is always close to the heart, as we are the nation that for centuries has researched as a democracy, and these are the values that are intrinsic to the core of the people of Poland. And also, as the Honourable Minister mentioned, the moral concept of a citizen, this is something very, very close to our minds and hearts. And without repeating many ideas and many pertinent questions and thoughts, and I was especially inspired by the professors, by showing us how the values and challenges to democracy are global, and they are the right topic for us to deliberate because we are facing the same as democratic societies, the same challenges. I would like to only to highlight one area that perhaps Poland would be more interested in knowing how to engage and to strengthen is the education for democracy. If we can include this area and why as a subject of reflection, deeper reflection, why this area? Because I believe that democracy is like any other public value. We don't see it, we don't have to name it. The societies don't have to name it like air. We don't have to name it air, but we need it. We don't have to know the word for water, but we need it for our existence. And the failure of, as Mr. Gauthier, my colleague, EU ambassador, mentioned, we all agree that we see that there is a decline of trust in the delivery of democracies. But I ask, is it not the perception issue? Are we sure? Are we doing enough for the people to know that the democracy is a flawed system, but as it has been said, it's very flawed, but just less flawed as any other system that we have tried. The democracy sounds like a hustle, like a disagreement, like a crowd that doesn't know which way to go. But it is still the system that works, that proposes good solutions, while the semblance of unity or efficiency given by other systems works only as long as the propaganda and the power of the autocratic systems hold. And there is no such society that struggles by itself to uphold the non-democratic system. While we are the examples, and there are many examples of societies that fight for freedom and for democratic values.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you. In some cultures, there's this thing about the bride having not to encounter the groom before the wedding vows. Sometimes this is the relationship between ambassadors designate and ministers. But all the same, I'm very happy to see you. And of course, as a politician, I will always interact and engage. Congratulations and welcome to Nigeria. This is my opinion. I will leave the rest to the development experts. In terms of the universal periodic review and the sort of the critiquing of systems, I think we should leave that till later on. Starting out, I think we should focus more on what, I don't know if any of the slides came up that talked about peer learning. So I think that should be the emphasis starting out, so that we don't discourage anyone to sign on and to participate, because we think that that's the whole purpose of the initiative. And then with regards to the comments of the ambassador designate on Poland, democracy and perception, I would say this. I think part of the problem, and which is again what I hope RPD will be addressing, is the focus on how communities are defined. Sometimes, especially here in Africa, there's a tendency to define communities in tribal, ethnic, ancestral terms instead of in political and civic terms. So I think we need to look at that. And then if you look at other parts of the world, their own challenge at the moment, I would say, is populism. So, and again, it has to do with the definition and because populism trades on an oversimplification of complex democratic processes and the complexities of society itself. So this is where you have problems. So you can see how both are challenges. We have this definition of community in tribal or ancestral terms, which results in conflict, and then in certain parts of the world, in the global north, for instance, you have this challenge with populism and perception of very complex processes.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Just to quickly inform the roundtable that while the interaction was going on, the Honourable Chairman, House of Representatives Committee on Foreign Affairs, Honourable Oluwole Oke, and members of the committee, Honourable Dr. Wali Ahmed and Honourable Salisu Yusuf Majigiri, joined us. You're welcome, distinguished members. Sir. Any more questions?
Maybe just to make a contribution. Thank you very much for the spirited engagement, Excellencies. We are very, very grateful. I think I just wanted to underscore that this remains a co-creation process. We may not have all the answers to some of the things immediately, but as Richard, you said, the process is important as the product or the platform that comes out of it in terms of the credibility and everything. So we count on you as well as to leverage your expertise and inputs as we really look into an engagement strategy around this collectively. And so we welcome any contributions from you, but it's a co-creation process, and we know that. And back to the question that you also asked Annette on the engagement strategy around that. Part of what we are leveraging is also our country offices in the various countries that we are in, and of course the foreign missions as well. And I know Your Excellency, you were also already in Ghana recently discussing the same with the Foreign Minister of Ghana. So there are informal consultations that are coming, there are formal consultations coming up. And we already did that also this week also with the West African ambassadors and also here. So I just want to say it's a process that is ongoing, and we absolutely want to do business as usual. It doesn't have to be the same thing that over and over again, and we welcome your reflections and your advice as well, as we create something quite important and powerful for the SAB region under the leadership of Nigeria. So I thought I would just underscore that it's still an ongoing process. We can continue to refine as we go forward. Thank you.
Okay. Any more comments or questions? It's been a very interactive session. Do we have any more comments, Your Excellencies? Okay. I do not see anybody signifying interest to take it on any further. But thank you very much for the very
if you can, before you round up, I think it would be good for the elected officials in the room to say something, contribute to the products of the process of the elected. Thank you. The chairman. Chairman.
Fellow colleagues, the Honourable Minister, ambassadors, the UNDP rep, I want to apologize for coming a bit late. We had other colleagues, or two of the colleagues, including official visit to Mali, ambassador, traditional, so, Mali was to speak on the Christmas. So I had to ask colleagues to kind of agree. So sincere apologies. We were here yesterday. Tomorrow we can start checking. Started this program. We commended the brains behind it. It's a good initiatives. We listened to them without attention yesterday. Also listening to comments. Then it's again.
Thank you. So we're here yesterday at the commencement of this engagement. We commended the initiators. It's a very deep thought process to have come along this way. Our position is that the agenda tallies, it's in line, it's in tandem with the provisions of our constitution. It's also in tandem with the demands of AU vis-a-vis ECOWAS. So it's a good idea. And our position is that we need to flesh up the agenda legislatively so that we do not adopt the rules of the thumb running the entire program. We should have the do's and don'ts. And of course, we also talked about funding. It's not one of the engagement. So we are looking at how we can add value legislatively, and when we come under funding budget process, so we can also accommodate the program. So that's our takeaway for now. I want to thank you for finding time to attend this program. We also accept and agree we can only make progress on a very peaceful environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairman. And I'm sure Your Excellencies would agree that it's been a very insightful and very enlightening engagement this evening. And in itself, this is exactly what peer learning and co-creation is all about. Your Excellencies, we're bringing the event and the conversation to a close, but may I now invite Her Excellency, the Deputy Resident Representative, UNDP Nigeria, Madam Vesha Redcap, to give us the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The vote of thanks is the easiest thing to do. So we thank His Excellency, Honourable Minister, Honourable Senators, Excellencies, High Commissioners, Ambassadors. We thank Honourable Minister in his co-creation for inviting you all in the UN House, which is, as member states, is your house. So thank you for coming. And what a great end of day to spend the late afternoon, early evening talking about the state of play of how we all collectively as countries can improve democracy around the world. That's a meeting worth coming to, isn't it? And I think we all felt it from all your feedback in this stakeholder dialogue. So thank you. And just by closing, maybe three things after rich dialogues like this, you might remember three things. So I will remind you where we started with the opening of His Excellency, the Honourable Minister. Again, the spirit in which we, as UNDP, under the leadership of Elsie as the resident representative, are really supporting the vision and the leadership of His Honourable Minister and the government of Nigeria as the anchor country in this initiative. The spirit of the co-creation and I quote the minister, is within the realities, democracy within the realities of the 21st century. That was the discussion of this afternoon, was it not? And this is a universal endeavor that we're trying to improve. And it was also in the spirit of multilateral diplomacy. But there was a call to action. So I will end with the three elements of the call to action where the Honourable Minister began. So the first call to action, by closing and summary, was the request by the Honourable Minister for recognition and endorsement, and that you include the Regional Partnership for Democracy in your regional cooperation work as member states. Secondly, it was a call for partnership around policy and the technical bits, and for UNDP, that's really where we come in support. So that's a warm invitation, and we hope to hear from you all, and Elsie is waiting to get those calls from all of you. And finally, third, but not last, is the call to action and request by His Excellency, the Honourable Minister, to align the regional partnership for democracy within your regional development frameworks across the sub-region. So those were the three calls to action for this dialogue by way of summary. So I will end with the framing and an offer that I liked, that I picked up by the final words of the Honourable Minister, where he had stated in his opening that the Regional Partnership for Democracy is a global public good. So I thank you. Merci.
Your Excellencies, there will be a photo session just right outside in the foyer, and our hosts have also been kind enough to provide early dinner just right outside. It's fine.
Well, my right hand side, I was tapping into you. Thank you.